Anakin walked through the gates of the temple on Coruscant with the clone detachment around him, and the glare from the towers reflected off the marble floor like cold blades. The red alarm pulsed at intervals, marking a rhythm reminiscent of war drums. He kept his hood down, and the tense silence of the corridors seemed to watch his every step. "General Skywalker, we await your orders," said the captain. Anakin looked up and saw the empty main hall, echoes of distant footsteps, dust in the air. "Advance, but no one fires without my command," he replied, his voice breaking the stillness. Sidious' mission spun like an invisible chain around his throat. "End the resistance, do whatever it takes," echoed the Chancellor's memory. Anakin clenched his fist and felt the fury demanding passage, an ancient rage that promised to solve everything with brute force. But there was a different kind of weariness that night, as if the Force demanded attention to something beyond the war. "Sir," insisted the captain, "sweep by sectors, seal doors. I'll lead the vanguard," he decided, pointing to the north corridor. At the third archway, the Force hit him like a wave that pierced through steel and stone. It wasn't combat pain, nor the premonition of an ambush. Came hot, urgent, like a direct appeal to the center of his chest. Padme's face appeared in his mind, and with it came a spasm that was not his own, followed by a short gasp. "Padme," he murmured, breaking stride. The clones looked at each other, confused by the pause. He closed his eyes for a moment and heard a heartbeat quickening. "Lord Vader, concentrate," Sidious' voice hissed through his memory, oily and demanding. "The future you desire depends on your obedience." Anakin inhaled through his mouth, seeking steadiness without admitting weakness. "I am concentrating," he growled, though he knew something was distracting him. Another contraction crossed the bond, deeper, surrounded by fear and courage. "Is she in labor?" he asked himself almost soundlessly. The captain approached. "Problem, sir. Nothing that interferes with the mission," he replied, but his gaze betrayed his shock. The next corridor opened onto a gallery of statues of ancient masters, shadows stretched out like silent sentinels. Anakin walked among them and felt the pulse of the Force repeat itself, this time accompanied by a soft call. It was as if life itself was pushing the tide of darkness away from his heart. "Anakin?" echoed the memory of Padme's voice, sweet and distressed, without complete words, only intention. "Hang in there, I'm here," he whispered back, not realizing he had spoken aloud. The captain noted the marking on his helmet, wondering at the dialogue with the void. The tension increased when internal doors broke the seal and a group of tactical support clones presented themselves with detonators. "Authorization to clear the East Sanctuary, sir." Anakin weighed the proposal, his eyes sharp as blades. "No explosives in sacred areas. Let's do a selective sweep," he determined, contrary to protocol. "But Order 66, the sergeant ventured. Anakin cut him off with a gesture. "I gave an order." The silence that followed carried something the soldiers recognized: the authority of war. The next wave of the Force brought not only pain, but the harbinger of crying, an omen that seemed to be born before the sound. Anakin pressed his palm against the cold wall, as if he could anchor himself to stone. "Stay with me, Padme. I'm coming," he murmured. The memory of Sidious' promise, that the power to save those he loved required sacrifice, passed like poison through his mind. The saber in his hand weighed less than the choice before him. The captain opened the communicator. "Advance posts ready for final assault." Anakin raised his hand and closed his fist, suspending the announcement. "Negative. Reposition. Form a cordon in the atrium and wait." "Sir, that gives time for possible survivors to regroup." "That's why I'm staying ahead," he replied, and the blue blade lit up with a snap. He needed movement to think, but each step pushed him in another direction. Padme's apartment, the edge of the Senate, the illuminated shore of Coruscant. "You hesitate," whispered Sidious' memory, cold as metal in the rain. "Because something greater than you calls?" Anakin replied quietly, accepting the confrontation he had avoided for years. He saw the intimate projection of a brightly lit room, trembling hands, short breaths, and understood that the time had come. Captain, take over security. No one crosses the internal staircase without me. What about you? I have something to check. With all due respect, this violates the command's plan. The plan has changed, he said, and his tone ended the discussion. Stepping out onto the open balcony, Anakin gazed down at the layered city and listened to the distant roar of traffic. Coruscant never slept, but tonight it seemed to hold its breath. If this is the price, I'll pay it now, he whispered, more to the Force than to any ear. The vision of Padme bent over, leaning on someone who wasn't him, bit deep. I should be there, he said, and guilt tightened like a heated band. Anger sought a way out, but found a wall made of something simple. Protect. He tapped the communicator and called the Senate office with a code no clone knew. Static, then a nervous reply. Senator, is everything? It's Anakin. Padme needs immediate and discreet medical assistance. Now. Anakin, where are you? Don't argue. Send support droids and a trusted doctor. No records. I'll take care of anyone who tries to stop me. The line crackled and consent came quickly. Understood. He closed the channel, feeling the clock of war and the clock of birth ticking in opposite directions. Lord Vader, weak you will become if you allow fear to lead your hand, whispered the memory of Sidious' distorted lessons. It is not fear, he replied firmly. It is duty. The word sounded different when he spoke it, as if he had recovered it from under the rubble. Duty to those who trust him. Duty to the life that is coming. Duty to the truth that insists on being heard when the noise of war ceases. The saber went out, and he tucked the hilt into his waistband, choosing the direction opposite the shadow. Anakin returned to the main hall and faced the captain, who was awaiting further instructions with the troops in a semicircular formation. Containment until further notice. Those who resist, disarm them. Those who retreat, do not pursue them. Secure the access points and seal off the West Tower. I'm going to resolve a critical issue and return. Sir, at least allow us to escort you. Denied. This is a route I travel alone. The captain's helmet tilted in resignation. Yes, sir. Anakin turned, and his dark cape cut through the air like the end of a sentence that promised continuation. As he crossed the last internal bridge, the Force gave him a calm certainty. The decision had been made, and the price would be paid later. Wait for me, he said, in the direction where he knew Padme was. The distant roar of Coruscant seemed to respond, like a sea of lights pushing him forward. He quickened his pace, each step erasing a trace of the path Sidious had laid out. If there is power to save, I find it at your side, he said, and the huge city opened an invisible corridor for the man who runs, not to conquer, but to arrive. Anakin advanced, and the eyes of the young people hiding among the columns followed him with expectation and fear. The lit saber illuminated their faces, revealing the confidence they still had in him. Master Skywalker, what shall we do? Asked one of the Padawans, his fragile voice echoing through the space. Anakin turned on his lightsaber, but was interrupted by a sudden surge in the Force, so intense that it made him stop. He put his hand to his chest and felt as if something else demanded his attention. It was Padme. The vision that formed in his mind did not come from mortal eyes, but from the bond of the Force. He saw Padme arching her body, sweat dripping amid the pain, her hands searching for support. The muffled sound of a scream made him shudder. No, it can't be now, he murmured, turning off his lightsaber for a moment. The young people approached, not understanding. For them, Anakin was their salvation against the threat of the clones surrounding the temple. But inside him, the war was not against soldiers. It was against time and against himself. Every contraction Padme felt, Anakin also felt as shock waves in the Force. It was impossible to ignore. He fell to his knees, breathing heavily, as his mind was flooded with images of the baby struggling to be born. The future that Sidious had promised to control was slipping through his fingers. Padme, I'm here. I feel you, he whispered, but the words were just wind amid the approaching battle. The Padawans looked at each other, confused, but did not dare interrupt him. Padme, in her residence, moaned in pain, surrounded by medical droids who could barely follow protocols under such urgency. She closed her eyes and, for a moment, saw Anakin in her mind, as if he were kneeling before her. "Anakin, where are you? I need you," she murmured, not knowing if he could hear her. The Force, however, created the bridge that words could not. The bond between them pulsed alive, connecting mother and father amid pain and hope. "Lord Vader, complete your mission," Sidious' voice roared through Anakin's mind, breaking his trance. "Don't be distracted by illusions. The future you desire demands obedience." But what Anakin felt was not an illusion. It was too real, too close. The baby was coming, and no promise of power could compete with that. He rose slowly, the saber trembling in his hand. The young people watched him, unsure whether the blade would be his salvation or his doom. Deep down, Anakin began to sense something strange. The Force showed not only pain, but also life. He felt the baby's rapid heartbeat, then another, distinct rhythm, as if two melodies were intertwining. "What is this?" he asked himself, not understanding. To him, it seemed like just the intensity of birth. He never suspected that more than one life was about to emerge. But the Force whispered insistently that this moment would change everyone's destiny. One of the young men dared to step forward. "Master Skywalker, why are you crying?" Anakin touched his face and felt the tears falling. It wasn't sadness or anger. It was an overwhelming mixture of love, fear, and hope. He lowered his saber and replied, "Because life is calling louder than war." The young people did not understand the depth of his words, but they sensed that something within him was changing. It was as if the warrior who had entered the temple had lost the dark conviction he had carried with him. Meanwhile, Padme clutched the sheets, arching her back in another wave of pain. "I can't," she said, almost without a voice. The medical droid replied, "Senator, focus. The child is about to be born." She closed her eyes again, and in the silence of her mind she heard Anakin's voice. "You can do it, Padme. I'm with you." Tears ran down her face, not out of fear, but out of the certainty that, even from afar, he was still connected to her. Anakin heard his own heart in tune with Padme's. He felt that the fate of the galaxy hinged on that moment. Sidious' promise to control death no longer made sense. The life that was coming was the real key. "This baby is the balance," he murmured, almost without realizing he was speaking aloud. The Padawans looked at each other, frightened and hopeful. The silence of the temple seemed to await his choice. "Lord Vader," Sidious' voice returned, more cruel, more insistent. "You hesitate. If you don't act now, you will lose everything." Anakin closed his eyes, fighting against the order that weighed like a chain on his soul. But at that moment, another voice spoke, soft as an ancient wind. "Follow life, not death." He didn't know if it was a memory or an intervention from the Force, but it sounded like Qui-Gon Jinn. The conflict in his chest became unbearable. He looked at the young people before him, their eyes wide, and lowered his saber for good. "Run. Hide. Now." The children hesitated, but the firmness of his voice made them obey. Anakin knew he couldn't protect everyone, but at least he was giving them a chance. Deep down, it wasn't just mercy. It was a reflection of what he felt for the life Padme carried. He couldn't destroy hope when a new hope was being born in his heart. With his cloak swaying behind him, Anakin walked to the side exit of the temple. Each step was a weight lifted from his shoulders, each pang of Padme's pain in his mind pushing him faster. "Wait for me. I'm coming," he said silently. He didn't know how he would face Sidious afterward, or if he would survive the weight of betrayal. But at that moment, the choice was made. Anakin Skywalker would go to Padme, because life spoke louder than any promise of power. Anakin crossed the streets of Coruscant as if the whole world were about to collapse. The dark cloak fluttered behind him, but there was no longer any sign of war in his footsteps. There was only despair. Each of Padme's cries pierced the Force and pulled him like an irresistible magnet. When he finally reached the residence, he pushed the door open violently and ran through the corridors to the bedroom, where the medical droids were working frantically. Sweat dripped down Padme's face as she writhed in pain, but her eyes sought only one thing, his. "Anakin?" she murmured between moans, and her voice was like a flame that rekindled something forgotten. He ran to the bed and took her hand, pressing it against his chest. "I'm here. I'll never leave your side again," he promised, tears streaming down his face. Padme closed her eyes and took a deep breath, knowing she had to believe those words. The whole room seemed to spin, and only the connection between the two remained steady, like a thread of light amid the chaos. The droids adjusted instruments, and a human doctor, called in hastily, ordered each step with precision. "It's time. Senator, concentrate." Padme screamed, and Anakin felt his body shake as if the pain were his own. He leaned close, touching her forehead. "Come on, Padme. Use the Force. I'm with you." His words were not technical, but they carried the truth of a man who had put war aside to be just a husband. At that moment, nothing was more important than seeing her live. The cry broke the silence like lightning in a closed sky. Anakin's eyes widened when he saw a small being wrapped in cloths being lifted before them. His heart raced in a way he had never experienced before. "It's a boy," announced the doctor, handing him to Padme. She smiled through her tears, still gasping for breath, hugging the child tenderly. "Anakin, it's our boy." He touched the little face with his fingertips, feeling the warmth of the new life. "Luke," Padme said, her voice weak but full of love. "His name will be Luke." But before he could lose himself in the moment, another cry shook the room. Padme arched her back again, and the droids stirred. "There's another one," exclaimed the doctor, surprised. Anakin stood still for a moment, not understanding. His gaze shifted from Padme to the first baby, and back to the doctors. "Another one?" he repeated, his voice breaking. Padme cried, not only from the pain, but from the revelation that no one had predicted. There was more life inside her. The second birth was even more intense, as if the galaxy itself was waiting. Anakin did not let go of Padme's hand for a second, whispering through his tears, "You can do this. I'm with you. I always will be." Finally, another cry filled the room, different but equally strong. "A girl," said the doctor, lifting her up carefully. Anakin's tears fell uncontrollably. "They're twins," he murmured, almost in disbelief. Padme smiled, exhausted but radiant. "Our girl will be called Leia," she said, caressing her daughter's little face. "Our twins, Anakin. They came to change everything." Anakin looked at the two little ones breathing heavily but full of life. His eyes darted to Padme, who despite her exhaustion held them with infinite love. "You survived," he said, as if it were a miracle. "And they are our light." Padme caressed his face with her fingertips. "Now you understand. The power you sought was never with Palpatine. It was always here with us." Her words were like a blade cutting through the last shackles of the dark side. The silence that followed was filled only by the sound of the twins breathing. Anakin watched them, and for the first time in a long time he felt peace. But along with peace came fear. What would he do now? Sidious would not accept his defection, and the Republic was already in ruins. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the choice he still had to make. The lives of his twins depended not only on a successful delivery, but on his courage to oppose the empire he had helped build. Padme, though weak, found the strength to speak. "Anakin, look at them. The future is here, not in promises of power. They need you as a husband, as a father. Choose life, not darkness." He stared at her, torn between tears and anger at himself. "What if I'm not strong enough?" Padme shook her head slowly. "You will be, with them by your side." Her eyes filled with tears, but also with hope. Anakin took the twins in his arms for a moment, one on each side, and felt his heart burst with a mixture of fear and love. "They're too small," but I feel like they already carry something bigger than me. The Force vibrated around him, confirming his intuition. Destiny lay before him, written not in lightsabers or battles, but in the innocent eyes of two lives that had never asked for war. He took a deep breath, sealing within himself the decision not to let Sidious touch them. If their future depends on me, I will protect them, Padme. I will protect you. No matter what comes, I will not be anyone's slave. Padme smiled, closing her eyes in relief as the twins cried softly. That simple room in Coruscant had become the center of the galaxy, the place where everything changed. Anakin's fall was not inevitable. The Force had given him a new chance, and he was ready to seize it. Anakin looked out the window, the illuminated city stretching as far as the eye could see. The noise of ships and battles seemed distant. A new era begins today, he murmured. He turned back to Padme and the twins, and certainty shone in his eyes. The fate of the Jedi, the Republic, and the entire galaxy had been redrawn in that room, in the moment when a man torn apart by war finally chose to be a father. Padme was alive, breathing heavily but with a serene smile beside Luke and Leia. For Anakin, that miracle was proof that he had never needed Sidious. He could see clearly now. All the Chancellor's talk had been a trap to turn him into a servant. But there was still a terrible weight on his mind. If Sidious discovered the twins, he would not hesitate to try to kill them, just as he would Padme, just to keep him bound in chains of fear. Anakin knew he could not allow that. Making his decision, he rose silently and caressed Padme's face. I'll be back soon. I need to finish something I should never have started. She held his hand with what little strength she had left. Anakin, don't do this out of hatred. Do it so that our twins can live in peace. He nodded, taking with him the flame of hope. Each step out of that room was heavy, but determination pushed him forward. It was no longer for himself, but for the family that had just been born. Meanwhile, without Anakin leading the attack, the clones faced greater resistance inside the temple. Masters and Padawans organized themselves, erecting barricades and slowing the offensive. This precious time allowed Yoda, returning from Kashyyyk, and Obi-Wan, after escaping pursuit, to reach Coruscant. The two joined the fight, inspiring the Jedi to resist. The massacre was not avoided, but the flame of the Order resisted longer, refusing to be extinguished. At that very moment, Sidious was preparing to address the Senate, wearing the cloak of lies that would consolidate the Empire. He adjusted his posture in front of the mirror, satisfied with his manipulation of the galaxy. But before he could leave, the door to his room burst open. Anakin entered, saber in hand, gaze fixed. There will be no speech today. His voice was firm, without hesitation. Sidious smiled, his skin still marked by the confrontation with Windu. I see you finally understand who you really are. Yes, I do, replied Anakin, advancing slowly. I am a husband, I am a father, and I will no longer be your weapon. Sidious raised his hands and fired energy bolts, hatred throbbing in every spark. Anakin crossed his arms and raised his blue blade, absorbing and repelling the attacks with precision. The clash lit up the room, reflecting off the Sith's deformed face, which was still recovering from his previous confrontation with Mace Windu. The power that sustained him was no longer enough against Skywalker's renewed strength. The battle intensified. Sidious advanced with furious movements, his red saber clashing with Anakin's in sparks of war. But the Emperor's weakened body could not keep up with the energy of the Chosen One's youth. Anakin advanced blow after blow, each one firmer, each one driven by the memory of Padme and the twins. You cannot destroy me, Sidious growled. Sidious retreated, but the very energy discharge he had tried to use against Windu and now against Anakin turned against him. His body shook, enveloped in flashes that burned the air. Anakin seized the moment and drove his blade through the Sith's chest, ending the shadow that had dominated the galaxy for decades. Sidious's scream echoed off the walls before falling silent forever. Skywalker watched the body fall, and in that silence he understood that true power lay not in destroying, but in protecting. Without delay, Anakin returned to the temple, where Yoda and Obi-Wan were still fighting to resist the advance of the clones. He found the corridors in flames, the smell of gunpowder and energy burning the air. "Anakin?" said Obi-Wan, surprised to see him return. "Where have you been?" Anakin raised his lightsaber, eliminating the root of it all. Yoda narrowed his eyes, sensing the change through the Force. "Different you are. New choice you have made." Anakin simply nodded, and together they advanced to liberate the temple. The final clash between the Jedi and the clones was devastating. But with Anakin alongside Yoda and Obi-Wan, the battle turned in favor of the Order. Anakin's every move seemed to carry the energy of the living Force, guiding his strikes with deadly precision. The clones were knocked down, disarmed, or pushed out of the temple. When silence finally fell, the Jedi Temple still stood, wounded but not destroyed. On that day, the galaxy did not witness the rise of the Empire, but the emergence of a new hope. Sidious was dead, and the Jedi, though wounded, remained united. Anakin returned to Padme, finding her with Luke and Leia in her arms. He knelt before the family, touching the twins' heads reverently. "I chose you. I will always choose you." Padme smiled, and the Force around them seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Thus, the timeline changed. The dark future that threatened everyone had been broken by the birth of two children and the choice of a man who finally freed himself. The Jedi survived, the Republic had hope of being rebuilt, and Anakin Skywalker found in fatherhood and love the true path of the Force. The fall to the dark side was never inevitable.